Know this. Introducing the original blood clot podcast, not players. Soothing Semantics. Special dedication all the way from New York. Boom. Yeah, man. SOOT Semantics. Yeah, me know. Boom. Soothing Semantics. Yeah, me know. Big ups to the man now. Soothing Semantics.
Welcome to another episode of Soothing Semantics. I'm your host, Rafi Pinsky. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, leave your comments. And today we have a guest from a group, initially an ultra-Orthodox anti-Zionist group called Neturei Karta. Might be a little difficult for some people to pronounce.
But if we are two oppositions and we don't come together and figure out maybe one is right, maybe the other is right, maybe both are right.
I don't want to have a conversation because I can get into wrong things and I don't want to have that in my head.
But we're going to get right to it. Today we have Yochanan, that's with a Yochanan Lowen on the show from Canada. How's it going, Yochanan? Thanks for coming.
Hi, Rafi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Give us an idea of what Neturei Karta is, because when I was going to, I have my own idea, but obviously for the viewers, when I was living in New York growing up, we had the Israeli Day Parade in Manhattan, and whenever we would walk, because in my high school we had a float, we had a float as part of the parade, and I would always see a group of the Neturei Karta, and I would always get very angry. I'd get very annoyed when I saw them, So give us your perspective growing up in that group in Canada. Tell us what it's all about, what it stands for, and how it was created.
I was born in London, England, and I was there in a Neturei Karta family and environment. And I came to Canada at the age of 10 and a half. So, and here I was also connected with Neturei Karta. Yeah, so Neturei Karta can be confusing because you have the original main group of Neturei Karta, and then you have a subsect of Neturei Karta that's more radical and extremist. The group of Rav Moshe Ber Beck and Yisrael David Weiss, the ones who are popular, who are famous on the media.
Yisrael Weiss, I'm very familiar with. Yeah.
Yes. I know Yisrael David Weiss since I'm a child, from in London, and so I was davening with him in the same shul that has 9.5 people, the whole shul.
9.5, you say, huh? What happened? They cut one of their.
Sometimes 9.5, sometimes 11.5. Sometimes they didn't have minyan. They couldn't do the prayers. They had to wait because you need 10 people for a minyan, right? So, I remember there was once. There was a boy that's younger, not bar mitzvah yet, who was holding a Sefer Torah, the Torah scrolls. Mm-hmm. Because there is a law, if you have a child that is younger than bar mitzvah, but if he has, let's say he's 12 or maybe or 11, if he has a Torah scrolls on his lap, then he is considered as someone who is bar mitzvah already, and he can count for minyan. So remember they did this once. Anyways. So you want to know about Neturei Karta in general, or you want to know about this subsect of Neturei Karta that are doing stuff that many of the regular Neturei Karta would not do and are against it, like to go to Ahmadinejad and Gaza and Yasser Arafat, and going to demonstrate together with Palestinians and say stuff like like they say and what they have on the signs. So maybe
what do they have on the signs? What do they say? I happen to know, but for people who don't?
I don't remember because I wasn't involved for many years, but maybe that Zionism is the Jewish cancer, the state of Israel should be destroyed or something. Everything should go back to the Arabs, and we don't have a right on the land, and state of Israel doesn't have the right to exist as a political state and stuff like that.
Well, 100%. So, and I can post pictures of this too. I'd like to know about both groups, right? So the main group and the subgroup. How did it start? Meaning, I understand. I guess Yisrael Weiss and you said what was the other guy's name?
Moshe Baerbeck. He passed away.
Okay, so they were the founders, essentially.
Moshe Baerbeck was like the leader of this subsect, of this subgroup.
Okay.
Of Neturei Karta, yes.
Okay, so how did the main group start?
The main group started in Jerusalem, I think in the 1930s or so, or 1920s. There was basically. By the way, there is an interesting anecdote about Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, the author of Leva Ivri. So it said that the Akiva Yosef Schlesinger was the grandfather of Zionism and the grandfather of Neturei Karta, all at the same time. So, and that's weird, right? And why is that? Because the Leva Ivri, I gave lectures about him on the Clubhouse app, audio app. And we had even in the room, we had on stage a descendant of Akiva Yosef Schlesinger, and who is a Chabad rabbi. Anyways, so he, in one hand, he was a very extremist, like Neturei Karta, against assimilation, against studying anything besides Torah, against knowing the language of the country, and everything like that, against have any contact with secular people. In the other hand, he was the founder of the first religious yishuv in Israel, Petach Tikva. So he believed that the Orthodox Haredi people need to build up the land of Israel. He even wrote about the army and stuff. Because he thought that there is no future for Judaism in Europe, and the only way to save Judaism would be if all the Jews will come to Eretz Israel and have their own yeshuvim and their own language and their own everything, and that's how they can be separated from the world, from modernity. So he was a very strange figure. That's why some historians said he was the grandfather of Neturei Karta and the grandfather of Zionism. Okay. Anyways, there is a Kfar Aish in Israel, Kfar Aish on his name. Aish is the acronym of Akiva Yosef Schlesinger. So yes. So let's go back. But in the 1930s, let's say, there was you had Reb Amram Bloy, Reb Aaron Katznellenbogen, and they were kind. Amram Bloy was first the Yoshev Rosh of Agudas Yisrael in Yerushalayim.
Okay, so let's also remember to translate to English, because there's I understand everything you're saying, but for people that aren't Jewish or don't understand.
Yeah, maybe you can help me with translation, because you know what?
Yeah, sure. So the head of so you said Rosh what?
So you had Reb Moshe Bloy. Reb Moshe Bloy was the leader of Agudas Yisrael.
Right. So that's just a yeshiva for anyone that doesn't know.
No. Agudat Yisrael is the movement. It was the Haredi movement for Haredi Jewry. You have it still today. You have Agudas Yisrael in America. You have Agudas.
Yeah, I just always think of it as like a massive shul, so to speak, of like almost like an organization, shul franchise. It's like a shul McDonald's. That's what it seems like. Yeah, but I hear you. Okay, it's an organization.
It's like an organization, yes.
It's an organization, yeah.
So Reb Moshe Bloy was the leader of Agudas Yisrael, and his younger brother Reb Amram Bloy was also something in Agudas Yisrael, but later he realized that Agudas Yisrael is guilty for Zionism or for contacts with the secular community. So he left Agudas Yisrael, and he was a leader of Neturei Karta.
So quickly, just to backtrack a bit, he believed that Israel should be the place for Jews as long as they're religious, not secular. So that was seemingly his issue with Zionism, right? Is that Zionism was this secularist version of Judaism that's trying to kind of kidnap Judaism or steal Judaism away. And he was okay with Jews congregating in Israel and building a country because it would be a safe haven, as long on the condition that they were Orthodox. Am I hearing that right?
Yes and no. So I think that in the beginning, this was his original attitude, maybe. But later in the development of Neturei Karta, there were other ideologues that came in with different ideas, and Reb Amram Bloy adapted also their ideas. So later, the belief was that even if the Chofetz Chaim would be the head of the president of Medinas Yisrael, it would be the same treif.
So just to translate, the Chofetz Chaim was a prominent rabbi at the time, and
yeah. So the Chofetz Chaim was considered like the most famous saintly rabbi in the he died in the 1930s, and so they said even if the Chofetz Chaim would be the head of Medinas Yisrael, would be on top of would be the leader, it will still be the same rebellion against God. So in other words, there was also an idea that even if it's Orthodox and everything, it's still a rebellion against God to build a Jewish country.
Why is that?
So for that you have also different explanations and different opinions. So the simple explanation is that before the Messiah, before Mashiach comes, before the Messiah is here, we can't take our fate in our own hands. We can't go back. We can't return and have redemption from exile by our own hands. We have to wait till the Mashiach falls down from the sky and does that.
The only when we have Mashiach can we create a state. And how do you know when Mashiach comes? I believe
this will God let us know. We won't have.
I think
people all the world recognizing Mashiach.
Where we differ is that I think that the state needs to be there in order to accomplish Mashiach. Because I don't think Mashiach is that we just pray. I think Mashiach is that we're actually able to help the world around us and to be Or HaGoyim, to be the light upon the nations, to help those nations become empowered.
It's based also on a Talmudic statement that says that God made three oaths with the nations, and 3 oaths with Israel, and some of the 3 oaths that God made with Israel is that they should not bring the redemption before the time. They should not push it to come before the time. They shall not rebel in the nations. And they shall not come all together to the land of Israel biyad chazaka, with force. Okay, so that's why. So that's why many rabbis believe that this is forbidden to do. And it says there in the Talmud that God said to Israel, if you would not follow the 3 oaths, then your flesh would be your blood and flesh would be hefker. Your flesh would be I'm not sure how to say hefker or
Hefker,
mutar.
Hefker means like it's free. It's a free for all. You can give it away.
Yeah.
It's no longer.
Yeah, so your flesh would be free for the animals of the field. In other words, you will be killed out or something. So that's why the Satmar Rebbe, for example, claimed that the Holocaust was a punishment for the sin of Zionism.
That's a wild statement.
Yeah, that's in introduction of his book.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, some people believe that the reason why the Satmar Rebbe was so much against Zionism has to do more with psychology than with Torah.
How so?
How so? Because before the war, the Satmar Rebbe was one of the great leaders in Hungary, and one of the most popular leaders with a lot of power and a lot of followers. Now, but he didn't allow people in Europe, in Hungary, to move to America or to Eretz Israel. He didn't allow them. He thought everybody has to stay here, right? Like in the 1930s, 1920s, wherever. So then later, when the Holocaust happened, and the Satmar Rebbe and most of the Satmar Rebbe's followers were killed by the Nazis, and the Satmar Rebbe himself was rescued by whom? By the Zionist train. There was a train to, I think, to Switzerland. I forgot the name. The Kastner's train.
Okay.
And that was it was a train mainly for the leaders of Zionism, but they took in the Satmar Rebbe also with his
knowing he was an anti-Zionist.
Yeah, they knew very good about it. So, and they took him in. He was rescued through the Zionists. So then all his followers were killed out. So then, then after the Holocaust, if the Satmar Rebbe would made a cheshbon hanefesh, he would think he would make a reflection of what happened. He will be seen as the greatest loser ever, right? Mm-hmm. Because you didn't allow them to move to America, you didn't allow them to move to Israel, to the land of Eretz Israel. Now all your people were killed out because they obeyed to your leadership, and now you yourself rescued yourself with your gabbai, with your wife. You rescued by the Zionists, through the Zionists. So this is what can
such a hypocritical thing.
Yeah, it's such a hypocritical thing. So and not just hypocritical, but also it's like a false prophecy. It's like the people said Dr. Herzl was the true prophet, because Dr. Herzl wrote many years ago that this is going to happen. This is going to happen to the Jews, right? Mm-hmm. And the Satmar Rebbe and his colleagues says no, this would never happen. We should stay in Hungary. So now, who is the true prophet and who's the false prophet?
Right.
So because of that, psychologically, the Satmar Rebbe had to make the opposite conclusion and say no. He was right he was right all the time. He was right all the way. But the Holocaust happened because of the Zionists. Mm. Got it?
That's wild. So why did he? So the question I would ask to him is, why did you survive out of all people? You know, meaning that isn't. It's just still very ironic that out of all people, Zionists save you, and you believe that Zionists are the problem. So I get what he's saying. Yeah. So I still get. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. So Satmar today they wrote articles and they have whole explanations how they argue that the Satmar Rebbe was not rescued by the Zionists, because all this money that the Zionists used for themselves was actually they argue it was actually organized. It was actually sent from diaspora to go to the rabbis, to go to the Satmar Rebbe. But the Zionists collected the money instead of the Satmar Rebbe. So in other words, they rescued him with his own money, something like that. They have all kinds of explanations, but I think that mainstream, even in Satmar, many people know that it's all BS.
Right. I knew a guy when I was in the army. I knew a guy from Satmar who his grandfather was one of the Satmar, Rebbes, and he was in the army. Obviously, his
Oh
family.
yes, Chaim Meisels.
Yes, so you know him. Yeah. So his grandfather is which Satmar Rebbe, like the main.
His I think it's his great grandfather is Moshe Teitelbaum, who was the second Satmar Rebbe after Rabbi Yoelish.
Right. I don't know these names very well, but so
Rabbi Yoelish was the first Satmar Rebbe, Rabbi Yoelish, and he's the one we were talking about the whole time. Chaim Meisel's grandfather or great grandfather was a nephew of Rabbi Yoelish, so he was the second Satmar Rebbe.
Interesting. So either way, it's a big deal. He's connected to a prominent Satmar rabbi. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, there's so much to discuss, and obviously I have my views, which I'll give, but I want to ask you a lot more questions. So how did you, meaning what changed in your mind? And this is the golden question, is what part of you decided you didn't believe in these concepts and you were going to go in a different direction?
The concepts?
Yeah, and also specifically the concept of they believe that we shouldn't take it by force and it should be given to us when Messiah comes, Mashiach comes. Where do you differ from that? And how did you kind of take your own path?
Okay, that's a good question. It was basically a process of many years. I was always curious about different opinions, different rabbinical opinions. So every time I found great famous rabbis in the past, like rabbis before the war, for example, who supported Zionism, this was extremely intriguing for me, and I was always curious to know more about all of that and who these rabbis were and what exactly was their opinions and how do we know which rabbis to follow and all these questions. I was always curious about this and other stuff. So you can say slowly, maturely, I became less and less Neturei Karta. And that's one thing. Another thing that happened is that two of my idols in Neturei Karta split because one of them who I was more who I appreciated even more was against these activism of Moshe Berbek, and he tried to convince Moshe Berbek not to do that, and especially he was extremely angry when Moshe Berbek wrote in a pamphlet that it's allowed to say to the Palestinians, kill the Zionists, kill all the people that are against you, and take the land. And it's allowed to say to them stuff, even if this would cause killings of Jews. It's allowed because he made a pshatel from the Gemara why it's allowed. So his own.
Just real quick, a pshatel from the Gemara is just like a small little excerpt or like a small little quote or saying and from the Talmud.
Yeah, it's like to make a parallel, like to quote a Talmudic statement and make a analogy, an analogy and say this. The Gemara says so and so, and in our situation we can use this. We can use this statement because here we have a similar situation. So it's kind of an analogy to make a conclusion, to make an halachic conclusion. Okay. So there was an older Neturei Karta leader who Moshe Berbek himself was kind of following him, but in this particular case, the older one was against all of that, and so it became like a split. And so I was taking sides. So I was taking the side of the older one, who was against it. And although my family were more with the younger one, who was for it. Okay, and also because it's also relative. Because Moshe Berbek, who I told you, was actually doing shidduchim. Shidduch with my family, so he was also related to me through through marriages. It's called in Yiddish. It's called mechutenschaft, mechutanim. I'm not sure how you say it in English.
Isn't that in-laws?
In-laws, but not your own in-laws. Let's say your uncle married someone. Now your uncle's father-in-law. What is your uncle's father-in-law in relation to you? How would you define your uncle's father-in-law in relation to you? Is he related to you?
No, your uncle's father-in-law.
Yes.
Your uncle's
father-in-law. If someone will ask you.
Yeah, he's not related to you by blood.
Yeah, but how? But if someone would ask you, is this man related to you? What would you say?
Well, the uncle's father-in-law, I would say no. What do you mean?
You say not related at all? So there's no, because in Yiddish there is a label for this kind of relationship. It's called mechutanim. That's why I ask, because
I mean, it's sort of like family, but it's not blood related. I mean, it's, I guess, like a distant, you kind of consider it a relative, so to speak.
Right. So, but how would you define it?
I don't know. There's no word for it.
Okay, in Yiddish there is mechutanim.
Yeah.
There's a song, Mechuteneste meine. There's a Yiddish song. So Mechuteneste is the mother-in-law, let's say the mother-in-law of your daughter,
right,
or the mother-in-law of your son, would be a Mechuteneste.
Right. Well, I would just call that as in-laws. When you mention uncle, it seemed a bit more complex, because the uncle is already, if you're not related to the uncle, if I'm directly related to my aunt, my uncle is part of the family, but I'm not directly related to him. So his in-laws would mean that I'm not only not related to my uncle, I'm also not related to the in-laws. I would still consider them family, because it's still family, so to speak, because we're all in the same bubble, but it's really the aunt that I'm related to. But if I'm related to the uncle directly, and then we're talking about his in-laws, then I consider that to be a closer relationship. But either way, I would just call it all in-laws. That's why when I think of
in-laws, so they are in-laws towards you?
Yeah, that's what I would say. That's the only translation I can think of.
Okay. Yeah. So in other words, Moshe Baerbeck is more than once in-law to me.
Right. Fair enough.
Was. So and that's why many of my family members were in his group.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I took the side of the older Neturei Karta leader who was against his activities.
When you say activities, we're talking meeting Ahmadinejad.
His activism, yeah, this kind of stuff. He was also against that demonstrations together with Palestinians, and there was many differences.
So why was he against it? Because it put Jewish lives in danger? Because you're promoting violence against your own people, even if you disagree with your own people.
Yeah, that's definitely a strong reason.
You're supporting murder, essentially. Especially with your own people. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Fine. And
he was a Polish. The older one was a Polish Chassid, and the younger one, Moshe Baerbeck, was Hungarian.
Okay. And do you think that matters for some reason?
Maybe it matters. It's very possible that it matters, but.
Because you brought it up, you differentiated the two. So I was wondering if there was like a reason.
Yes, some people argue that it matters because but I don't know, because the Hungarians were known to be more extreme than the Polish, and more like black and white than the Polish Hasidim.
Interesting. Okay. So more extreme in terms of the way they viewed their religion, like they were less gray lines.
The Hungarian rabbis were more. For example, in Hungary, you have this Teilung means Teilung is like separation. The separation between the Orthodox and the Neologues was a very harsh separation, and you're not allowed to step into a shul of the Neologues, to a synagogue, and stuff like that. You're not allowed even to do brit milah, to do circumcision for a child from the Neologues. Okay, this was a very harsh separation between the Orthodox and the Neologues that happened in Hungary.
What is it? First of all, I have no idea what the word Neolog means. Secular Jew?
So Neologues was kind of the Hungarian Reform Jews, but they were called neologues, and they were less radical than Reform. They were less radical than Reform. They were and they were called the neologues, neologen. And in Hungary, there was a harsh split happened in the 1869. A very harsh split between the two. But in the other Jewish diaspora, like in Poland and Russia, there was never this kind of official split. Never happened. There's many books about it. If you check the separation in Hungary, I'm not sure how it's called in English. Maybe in Yiddish it's called a Teilung, but in English I'm not sure how they call it. But the separation that happened between the Orthodox and the Neologues in Hungary in the 19th century.
Okay. Well, there's always Jews have so many opinions. That's what we always kind of have these differing. But every group does this. So you followed one more than the other. You followed the less extreme one.
Yes.
Okay. And how over time did you get to where you are now? How did you remove yourself from it? At what point did you start to say, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm not connecting with this"? Because you said you were reading up about other rabbis who were Zionists. So where did things start to change? How did your mentality change?
So are you talking change in my heart or change in my demonstration to the world? I
guess both. Or both.
Okay, so in my heart, I was skeptic for many years about all of that, and especially when I was reading, for example, about Rav Kook, who was the first chief rabbi in the land of Israel, and he was a very strong supporter of Zionism, and he was a very unique character and scholar and saint. So he was for example, his figure was very intriguing to me, and also other figures, but especially Rav Kook, because when I grew up in our circles, you could say Yamach Shemoy of Rav Kook. Yamach Shemo is like
cursing his name.
Huh?
To curse his name, yeah.
Yes. So something like you said for Hitler and Stalin, and in Satmar you say it about Dr. Herzl, but some people say it also about Rav Kook. So and this was very intriguing to me when I see that here Rav Kook Yamach Shemoy, but here I see so many rabbis, saints, and scholars in the past were respecting Rabbi Kook very much. So what's going on here? I was always curious to different opinions and different perspectives, and censorship. I hated censorship. I always wanted to know things that are hidden from me, things that are censored from me. So I even wrote a book about Haredi censorship, not published yet. But one of my 7 on the Social Audio Clubhouse, one of my 7 clubs there is named Hasidic censorship. So I like always to expose censorship.
That's very good. I'm in full agreement of that. So, okay, so Rav Kook was seen as a very negative figure for Neturei Karta. So now
not just in Neturei Karta, also in Satmar.
Okay, so
Satmar is the largest Hasidic community in America.
Right, and I knew that. I grew up near Borough Park. So going forward, right, keeping it further along, how did you move away from it even more? I'm just trying to hear more of the story.
So in practice, how it happened was because I moved from Kiryas Tosh to Montreal, and my children went to a Hasidic institutions in Montreal named Square, and
Square, yeah.
Square, huh?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar. Yeah.
So and my son Chaim was 9 years old. One day he ran away from the cheder, and that's how a journey to freedom for the whole family, a journey of exodus, started with my son. So basically, I don't know if you're familiar that we have in the Haredi world, we have Hasidim, and we have Yeshivish.
I grew up. By the way, I grew up religious, and I know all about it. But
you know all about it.
I know all about it, but explain it to the viewers, especially if they're not Jewish, so they can understand.
So the Orthodox community can be parted in few major fractions or factions. So you have the Hasidim, you have the Yeshivish or Litvish, you have Chabad Lubavitch, and then you have modern Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between, there are some differences between Hasidim and Yeshivish. For example, the Hasidim go long side curls. Many of them, they speak Yiddish. They go long coats. They wear white or black socks on the Sabbath. Some of them also during the weekdays, and they have long beards. And they when it comes to prayer, for example, they do prayers very loudly and more time. The duration, it takes more time, the prayers by the Hasidim usually than by non-Hasidim.
Mm-hmm.
And different stuff like that. The Hasidim have many Hasidic sects. Who there's a leader, a spiritual leader, in top of every sect. It's called the Rebbe, the Hasidic Rebbe, and there's a lot of worship towards the Rebbe, so there's a lot of differences between the Hasidim and the Yeshivish. So one of the differences is also that in Yeshivish schools, the boys will have some sports, exercise. They will have some. They will receive some secular education, but in the Hasidic schools, there's no sports. Sports is taboo, and gym, exercise, everything like that is taboo, and in many or most Hasidic boys' schools, there is zero or almost zero secular education. So, and when my son ran away from the Hasidic cheder, we wanted to send him to a yeshivish cheder.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but guess what? Some people of my family members who lived in a Hasidic ghetto, Kiryas Tosh, for them it would be an embarrassment if their family member is studying in a non-Hasidic cheder. So there was. So they made contact with the Hasidic rabbis in the city, and they put pressure on the other cheders not to accept my son into their institute. We tried. So this was with one yeshivish cheder, then with a second yeshivish cheder, then the third one was Chabad Lubavitch. It always repeated itself, the same idea, to put pressure on them not to accept my son. So for 1 year, it was a war that took about a year, a war against us that we should not be able to do any kind of progress, even small steps of progress. So in the end, we registered him into a modern Orthodox co-ed school.
Wow, that's a very big transition. Okay,
exactly. And then the Hasidim sent us. Sent messages to me saying, we'll help you. The yeshivish cheders will accept you, or Chabad Lubavitch will accept you.
Why?
Son.
Because they felt bad. What do you think they?
No, because it went the opposite. The result, the consequence was the opposite of what they wanted. Their plan was that my son should stay in a Hasidic cheder, and that's why they put blockages. And obstacles that he should not be accepted in the non-Hasidic cheder, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here in the end, the consequence happened just the opposite. That we went we crossed all the lines, and we registered him to a co-ed school. Mm-hmm. So it has just the opposite result of what they wanted,
right?
So then they came to me and say, okay, we'll help you. We'll we'll register your son into these other cheders. But my wife said, too late.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, too little, too late.
Right.
And so my children were, and that's how the whole journey happened. When my children were already registered, were already studying in a co-ed school, my wife and me were still be dressed Hasidic.
Wow.
So it started with the children, not with us.
Wow. So you had the pious, you had the curls,
Yeah,
and your wife
everything,
and your kids were going to a modern Orthodox co-ed school.
Yeah, co-ed school.
So you showed up to pick them up, and you had everything on.
Yeah, maybe not everything. Maybe especially when I come to visit to go to the school, probably I didn't go with my Hasidic hat. But I still had the payas and probably and everything like that. It took time,
So what did your kids get bothered at school because their parents are different and they're different? Did they dress more?
No. My children were dressed exactly as all the other children. I never wanted to make any difference between my children and the other children.
Okay, and so what about you guys? Like, how come? Because you guys still had that.
Slowly but surely, we changed our style. First, my wife was hesitant because my wife was very much codependent in her mom. Like, she was afraid to make her mom sad. So in her family, my wife's family, even a wig was not kosher enough. Even a wig.
Right.
So she was afraid to wear a wig on the street, because her mom will get informed about it and will have heartache about it.
Right.
So it took a long time till my wife was comfortable to change her dress.
Okay.
So it took a long time. Later she changed. She wear pants,
Mm-hmm.
But it took a long time. She couldn't do it,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now your kids are in a co-ed school, modern Orthodox, all that.
And it was a Zionist school.
I'm sure it was. I actually went to more of a Litvish elementary school in Brooklyn because there isn't a lot of modern schools in Brooklyn. They're either the modern so-called schools aren't really religious at all. You have Yeshiva Flatbush, you have Magen David, and they're great schools in terms of education. My grandmother just wanted something a little more religious for me. So I ended up going to Derech HaTorah in high school, which I'm sure you're not familiar with, but that's really the only modern all boys school. There were other schools she was considering sending me to, but I went to a pretty relaxed Litvish yeshiva for elementary. So it was a good place. They had good English. They really did. It wasn't a high level, but for a pretty low budget school, I mean, it's not cheap by any means. I forgot how much it costed, but it's compared to, a non-Jewish private school, it's still expensive. But it was run well. The teachers were great. There were no scandals, no nonsense. The English principal was a woman, and she was very strict. We were all scared shitless of her. She was very, regimented. And it was good. Very honestly, I can't say anything bad about that school. And then high school was also good. Not the greatest education for high school. We messed around a lot, but it was good. Good teachers and everything.
How about college?
College, I went to a secular college, Brooklyn College. Good school, business degree. But I'm curious. So how did you? So you're Zion. Just to let you know, I'm right wing and I'm Zionist. So what's your take? Where do you stand?
I don't know much about. I don't know much about politics very much. I'm more in the world of Jewish history of Jewish theology and Jewish literature and stuff like that. Torah, Talmud. I may be a little bit leaned towards left wing more, but I don't really talk about it in my rooms. I like to talk about other areas.
Okay, but I'm saying in terms of Israel, are you pro-Israel? Are you not? What do you kind of?
I'm pro-Israel, but I'm also pro the Palestinians. I believe in equal rights for everyone. So I respect, for example, Professor Yeshayahu Leibovitz, who considered himself a Zionist, a left wing, and a Zionist at the same time. And he was a controversial figure in Israel.
Okay.
And I was reading some of his books. But but it's not my area of expertise. It's not my area. It's not really my fight. I have other things that I'm involved.
More interested.
Yeah,
Okay.
more interested.
Okay, so just in terms of the Neturei Karta's feeling on things, right? Because they believe that we weren't supposed to take it by force; it was supposed to be given. What's interesting is, don't you feel that in a sense we were given it? Because against all these odds, we were so outnumbered, and we were in such tough situation that it's hard really to imagine that there wasn't some kind of divine intervention. To think about the fact that we were so severely outnumbered, and we were able to win these wars. Don't you feel like, I don't know how much, are you someone who believes in God? Or, I mean, you're wearing a kippah. I kind of assume you probably are, but I have no idea.
I don't know much about God,
Right.
so I don't have much to say about God. Obviously, I was 100% believer in the past, but
Right.
But today, I don't know. I don't know what to say about God. So, but but I'm not. I don't consider myself atheist, but
Right.
consider myself more like non-orthodox.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah. Would you say you're agnostic, or you're just not really sure?
Yeah, sometimes I say I'm agnostic, and yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, I'll just give you my perspective. In terms of Neturei Karta, right? I think that to a large psychological degree, I think a lot of the Jews in Eastern Europe were, and I'm not talking about the Holocaust per se, but I even see it now, they're not exactly the toughest, most confrontational people. And during the establishment of Israel, you did have European Jews that were very strong and tough and strong spirited and were willing to fight physically and everything. But I think the big issue on a psychological level with Neturei Karta is that they have this notion that appeasing people is going to help us. And especially with Arabs or the Palestinians who don't want us on the land, they believe that by appeasing them, somehow it'll bring peace to us. And I very, very much disagree with that. I find that they're not going to like us anyhow. They don't want Jewish presence and Jewish influence in that region. They want Islamic presence and influence. And they simply don't like the idea of us being there, whether we have validity there or not. So, my argument, or we're not, you and I aren't arguing, but my argument against Neturei Karta is I think that, quite frankly, they're not, they don't have enough of a love for their own people. I think they're cowards because they're willing to throw away their own people and sacrifice their own people, which is disgusting to me. And they're entitled to have their own opinion, but it's one thing to have your own opinion. It's another to meet with Ahmadinejad, who made it very clear that he wants to eradicate Israel. And you have Jews who have different opinions. It doesn't mean you should wish them death. I don't wish Neturei Karta death, even though they probably do to me, or at least some of them do. So I think selling out your own people is not the way to do things. So that's one thing. Secondly, I believe that there's divine intervention. I believe that there's a very strong idea in Judaism of hishtadlut, which means doing your part. And as much as maybe there is a concept where we were supposed to be given the land when Messiah comes, being that I'm more of a traditional person, I don't know whether that was true or whether it wasn't. My feeling is if we weren't supposed to have it, we wouldn't have been given it. Meaning, if God didn't want us to have it right now, we wouldn't have it because of the way things turned out and the odds stacked against us. And that's what I believe. Anything's possible. My conclusion on Israel and the Palestinians is I do want Palestinians to have a good life, but at the end of the day, family comes first. And on a deeper human level, we're always going to prioritize our family. So it's nice to say that we want everyone to live harmoniously and peacefully, but humans are herd animals, and we're always going to take care of our own, usually more than others. And then you have Neturei Karta, who tries to take care of others before their own. You always have those groups. You have that in every culture. You'll have a group who go against their own people. You see that in every society. So with Israel, and when Jews started flocking in the early 1900s, there were Jews there before. I'm not giving you any history lesson. I'm just talking to people who are listening mainly, but obviously giving you my perspective is, when Jews started flocking in a bit before the war, after the war, the Arabs living there at the time didn't like it very much, and understandably so. They don't care what our Torah says. They said, well, we don't want you guys here after 2,000 years claiming it's your land. You've been conquered. You're gone. Deal with it. And the other argument that I would make is, well, I know you don't like it, but you don't exactly have autonomy. This isn't your land either. You're the majority group, and you've settled here for a very, very long time. But the British own it. The British call the shots. So the British get to decide who lives here and who doesn't, essentially. So we had the British mandate. The partition plan, the UN partition plan. The Arabs didn't agree to it, and we are where we are now. Meaning they decided to wage war. They said, hey, the Arab nations outside of Israel at the time said, hey, Palestinians, leave. We'll get rid of them, and you can come back after we get rid of them. Didn't exactly go as planned. They waged war several times afterward. They continue to do so. They keep losing. And now they say, oh, come on, you guys have the law of return. Why can't we? Why can't we have the same freedoms you have? It's like, well, if you would have agreed to share it, you probably would have been in a much better situation, which I believe is also part of God's plan. If it was supposed to happen, it would have happened. But the fact of the matter is, all is fair in love and war. So I do believe that Palestinians should have a better life. I do believe that the status quo is not a solution. All these checkpoints and walls, and the Palestinians definitely don't have it well at all. Gaza is not a long-term solution. At the same time, we are delaying fixing this issue because it's an extremely difficult thing to solve. It's so complicated because I believe that the Palestinians really don't want to share it with us, and I understand them to a large degree. But we fought wars. The winner wins, the loser loses. I mean, it's not an ideal and lovely thing to say, but throughout history, land has been conquered, land has been taken over, and you can argue whether things are wrong or right. But at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, we're the ones in power. So if the Palestinians manage to take it over again, I guess it's theirs. I mean, I guess that's how life works. But we do have to find a way to live better together. I don't know if sharing it and letting, opening up Gaza and saying, hey guys, come and live with us. We'll call the shots, but you guys can live among us. I don't know if that would work simply because it would put us at risk security wise. And as much as I'd like my loving and peaceful mind would like that to work, I think there are way too many Palestinians that would continue to fight us. And it puts us in a tough situation. It also means that we risk being a Jewish majority. They have a very high birth rate. I do think if they lived among us and there was no Hamas, no Islamic Jihad, no Fatah, they would secularize more and as a result have fewer kids. But we're taking a chance with all that. So I don't have a long-term solution. It's very difficult, man. It's a very difficult thing to solve. I do think that if Palestinians were more willing to accept that Israel is now the ruling body and they tried less to fight us and tried more to live harmoniously with us, it'd probably be an easier situation. So even the Israeli Arabs who kind of put the sword down and say, hey, you know what? We kind of would prefer maybe if we had rulership, but the Jews are doing a pretty good job with this country. Let's just kind of live in peace. We have jobs. We can be doctors, lawyers, attorneys, whatever it is. Let's just suck it up and deal with it. And many of them, if you ask them, do prefer that to live under Jewish rule because they know how a lot of Arab rulers and a lot of Arab countries are run, and they prefer the openness of Israel. The fact that an Arab Israeli can be gay and not be killed for it, and have all of these other freedoms. A lot of them very much like it, and some of them may not admit it, but many others would too. So that's really my take on it. And I think Jews throughout history have always had this idea that if we, bow to people and appease people, it'll make them like us. And I very much think that it goes against human nature. People respect individuality. They respect people having opinions and standing up for what they believe in. And as Jews, oftentimes we've tried to become like everyone else and lose our individuality. And I think that's often where we make that mistake. So, strength is something that people respect more so than weakness. I think that's a big component of Neturei Kartas. I think their idea is to promote weakness and apology and appeasement. And I think that Ahmadinejad, if he was able to destroy Israel, he wouldn't exactly leave Neturei Karta alone. He would use them for as long as he could and then kill them too. Very silly mistake that Jews make is that, oh, well, if we side with them, they'll spare us. That's just a cowardly thing to think. So that's really the overall 2 cents of my thoughts on all this.
Okay, interesting, Rafi. Thanks for the explanations. But I think that Neturei Karta are not always people of peace. There are many times, or most of the time, people of war. But
Well,
the question is
with the enemy. They're peaceful with the enemy. That's my point.
Right. So, and the reason why Neturei Karta is anti-Zionism has very little to do with the rights of Palestinians. Very little. Their problem with Zionism is not about human rights. Sometimes they use it as when they for rhetoric, but I realized very much that that's not the main point. When I was still there, so the main point is about fundamentalism, about what they consider heresy, and so it's not for them. It's not about human rights. I mean, they believe, for example, that non-religious Jews don't have human rights. And for example, this person, this leader, Moshe Beck, he believed, for example, that when Merkaz Harav was attacked a few years ago,
the yeshiva, the school,
the yeshiva Merkaz Harav, he believed that they deserve it, and he believed that he even believed that halachically we would supposed to go kill the Merkaz Haravnikas, to kill the yeshiva boys. We would have we were supposed to be doing this ourselves, but why don't we do it? So he had a weird explanation that since our forefathers, our leaders in the past, they didn't give us the training how to do it. That's why we can't do it. But it's just a matter of technique. But in theory, he believed we would have to kill all the Zionists and all the heretics,
he said of his mind,
and all the religious Zionists especially.
Okay.
So this was okay. So this was his belief system, and this was the system where I grew up as a child, So they're not exactly people of peace. That's what I wanted to just to clear up.
Interesting. Okay.
Because I know many people think that Neturei Karta are left wings, but they are not left wings. They are the right wing of the right wing of the right wing. They are the most extreme. They're not left wing at all. When it comes to because Zionism is their enemy, because the state of Israel is their enemy, that's why they believe in the rights of the Palestinians.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the point. The point for them is to fight Zionism. Their point is not to fight for human rights. That's not their issue.
So they just side with the Palestinians as a byproduct of hating Zionism because it's a common enemy. It's a common enemy. Okay. When
I was a young child, I was listening to Moshe Beck's preaching, and he would he said people think that we need to be compassionate people, and then he said that's false. That's not true. When the Torah says be compassionate, be compassionate. When the Torah says be cruel, be cruel. And I still remember it today because it was poison to my soul to hear this, but I had to believe it because since he said it in the name of Torah, right. I had to believe it. But it was I don't know, it was traumatic.
Yeah, it sounds terrible.
It didn't fit my soul.
Yeah.
And in later years, I found that mainstream rabbinic perspective, like Maimonides and many others, was not like this.
Mm-hmm.
Mainstream was the Torah believes always in compassion and never in cruelty. And if there are things in the Torah that seems to be cruel, it's a problem that needs to be explained, but not to say that we don't need that compassionate cruelty is all there's no difference between them. It's just like when the Torah says this, when the Torah says this,
Right, 100%. Yeah, 100%. But that's why people often misconstrue everything. And by the way, side note, I'm curious, and not that there's any judgment whatsoever. If you're a traditional person, how come you wear a kippah? Like while you're on the Zoom, on the video?
I'm not always wear kippah, but sometimes when I go to synagogue, I wear a kippah. Sometimes when I walk here in the religious area, I wear a kippah. So I was wearing a kippah today, so I thought, okay, I'll leave it.
Why not? I mean, no, I could not care less. I'm just curious. Do whatever your heart desires. Okay, so your kids still go to a yeshiva though? They still go to a modern school, or what?
Now they are grown ups. So now they are university and college and high school. They're not really in Jewish school now. No.
Okay. Well, you said high school, so even they're in like more of a public school in high school.
The youngest is in high school, yeah, but not in a Jewish high school. But okay. I forgot to tell you that my son was I don't know if I told you, appeared on Israel national TV on Yom Ha'atzmaut for Chidon HaTanakh in 2015 or 16. Okay. He was representing Canada in Israel.
Mm-hmm. Representing them with what you said? I'm not sure what Chidon HaTanakh.
The Hebrew Bible contest. So with the Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu and everything, there's hundreds of thousands of people, Israelis are watching it every Yom Ha'atzmaut on the national TV. Mm-hmm. They do every year Hebrew Bible contest.
So how does the contest work? What does he have to do? Just has to recite it and know it and memorize it?
Yeah, they have to memorize by heart, not just many chapters, but also all kind of questions. They have to know the answers, all kind of numbers and all kind of stuff. And then the winners of each country are going to Israel, and then in Israel there's the global contest, mm-hmm. and the top 16 are appearing on TV.
Wow, interesting. So what happens? What it seems is you grew up very, very, very Hasidic or Hasidic Haredi, and now you still have this sort of traditional interest for biblical text and learning, but it's instead of it being very practiced and outwardly and showing, you like it in more of a philosophical, scholastic kind of way, where it's not pushed on your children, but it's like, well, this is what I grew up with. Learn it and enjoy it, and for your own understanding.
And criticize it.
Right, and I think that's beautiful. I think that's great because it's still a part of you, but it is a part of you in a different way, in a different light.
Definitely,
in an intellectual kind of way. That's very nice. Yeah. I like that.
By the way, something similar to what you said now. There was a very popular rabbi in the 1700s who had radical ideas, and one of his ideas was that in our era, or the Messianic era, the study of Torah is relevant, but the doing of Torah, the commandments, is not relevant anymore.
Interesting.
And this was a very radical idea, and he was persecuted by many rabbis for his kind of radical ideas, and it was associated with Shabtai Tzvi, with Sabbatianism. But I actually liked that idea when I was reading about it. It was actually a kind of intriguing idea to me.
Almost like a revelation, right? You're like, well, this resonates with me.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I kind of find that to be the same truth for me. Just because I'm really not interested in radical religion in any form. I do think, however, though, that radical Judaism, as much as it can definitely have its negatives and its aggressiveness, is probably in history the least aggressive of the three religions in terms of conquest and all that. And I think you can argue Israel's been conquered even though we lived there before, but I still think it's a matter of conquest, which I'm okay with. I'm definitely pro-Israel. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums everything up. I'm sure there's a lot we can discuss, but would you say at this point, though, that you're in support of Jews living in Israel? And not obviously, I know you're in support of Palestinians having their own peace and being, but would you say that you're in support of Jews having their homeland and all that?
Definitely. I even planned to do Aliyah many years ago.
Interesting. How come?
Why I wanted to do Aliyah? Because I started my English alphabet at the age of 29. So my culture is Hebrew and Yiddish, and that's my world. And I need the Hebrew library. I need the Hebrew scholars. I need it. When I don't have it, I'm like a fish out of water.
Yeah. We can still meet them on Zoom, and you can talk to them in Clubhouse and in different ways.
Yeah, that's right. I do it a little bit.
Okay, but you think at some point you still want to do that, like move your family to Israel? That's still an interest of yours?
Yeah, it's still a thought. Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
One of my main goals that I'm very passionate is about publishing a book for the yeshiva world. That's going to be very eye-opening and revolutionary, and scholars, professors say that it's going to be a bestseller, and I hope that it wouldn't take very long.
I look forward to it. I'll definitely read it. It sounds amazing.
Do you read Hebrew?
Yeah, definitely. I speak Hebrew.
Okay.
Not 100% fluent, but I'm good. I speak it. Yeah, for sure. Remember, I was in the army.
Right. Probably your Hebrew is better than mine, because my Hebrew is only since I was 18, I started to read modern Hebrew books. But so my Hebrew that I learned is only from reading. So I never really learned the language or spoken the language. In our home and environment, speaking Hebrew was forbidden.
Right, especially modern Hebrew, yeah.
And exactly. And in my family, even to visit Israel was forbidden. So when I visited Israel, I had to keep it secret from my mom.
Wow, it's crazy. But it must have been so exciting because it was forbidden. Must have been.
That's right.
Incredible. You must have loved every second of it because you knew you couldn't be there, and being there.
That's right. And being by the Kotel was also something like that, because the Kotel was forbidden to visit. In Satmar, for example, it's forbidden to visit the Kotel.
It's crazy. What can you do? Everyone has their own opinions. We're a crazy species, really. We're just all finding reasons as to why we live for the 70, 80, 90 years we live before we die. We're just all trying to find meaning. It's really what it comes down to. That's why I kind of take a step back and I'm like, Palestinians, Israelis, French, Italian, whatever. We're just trying to, we prioritize our own. We're just trying to look after our own. And, it's so important to be as good of a person as you can be, but also understand that, some people are not going to be there for your best interest. That's a whole rabbit hole we don't have to get into right now, but it was really a very, very interesting episode. So thank you, Yochanan, for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time, and definitely would like to keep in touch. If you ever want to reach out, you have my number. You can message me on you can email me, whatever the case is. So guys, is there a good way for anyone to reach you if they have any questions, if they want to talk to you?
Oh, yes. The best way is on Clubhouse, probably, but also on email.
Okay. So
JohnLowenBook@gmail.com. Or on Facebook, Yochanan Lowen, and Instagram @Einikel. And so why Einikel? Because I'm a descendant of the most sanctified Hasidic rabbi of Poland, Hungary, Romania, and this from the 1700s. Yeah, Twitter, Yochanan Lowen, I think.
Okay, well, I'll make sure to post all of your information. So, guys, make sure to reach out if you want to have any kind of conversation with Yochanan. And thank you again for coming, brother. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Rafi, for having me.
Absolutely. Have a very nice rest of your Shabbat. Enjoy.
Bye. Shabbat shalom. Good Shabbos.
Take care. Bye.